Evening, everybody. It's live and uncut once again, Thursday evening, just turned 8 o'clock. My name's Paul Griffiths, bringing photographers to you. And my guest today, I'm absolutely delighted to have a guest today, is Matt Day from Ohio, all the way in Ohio. Welcome, Matt.
Hey, thanks for having me, Paul.
That's great. And let's just sort of get a couple of things sorted out. We got Ted Forbes a lot to thank, really, for first of all giving us the recommendations when he came across our shows, which has really helped us out. He's a tremendous fellow. I love his shows, and it's his fault that I've got literally a stack full of books here. And
yep, I know the same feeling.
You got the same thing. I got to strengthen my bookcase over the weekend.
Absolutely.
I got a feeling a certain man in red outfit is bringing a few more books for me. So
there
we go.
As always.
Thanks for joining me, Matt. This is really great because I think we got a lot of, apart from the fact that you're involved in the photographic business yourself, and I'm not, obviously, but I think with regards to us having our own show, we've got a lot of similarities. My first question, which I love to ask, what was the first camera you can recollect in your household when you were a young kid?
Probably, I would say the first one I really remember would be one of the Polaroid 600 one-step cameras, the big plastic box light kinds that, that just flips up and it had the flash and everything. It was kind of just the automatic Polaroid. It wasn't like an SX70 or anything.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. My dad, he runs a tombstone engraving business. And I actually work with my dad as well, but he's done this since I was probably 2 years old. That's whenever he bought the business. And whenever he would engrave a tombstone out in the cemeteries, say the relatives of that person, maybe they don't live near the cemetery, maybe they're states away or hours away, whatever it may be. And just so that way they could see the stone after it was done, he would take a Polaroid of it and then mail it to the people, to the family, just so they could see the stone if it was going to be, a good amount of time before they actually got to see it.
Sure.
And so I always remember seeing my dad with that camera in the garage with all of his, work things at his work table, where he has all the Polaroids to anybody that he needs to send, for anything like that, with all of his orders. And aside from that one, the other one would probably be a Pentax. And I wish he still had it, because my guess is it was a K1000. I don't know for sure, but my mom had a Pentax, and that was just sort of the family camera. It was the one she took on vacations, and what the school events, stuff like that. She always had that 35 millimeter SLR, and all she knows is that it was a Pentax, because I've asked her a million times if she can find
which one was
anything. Yeah. And I asked her, I said, was it a K1000? And she's like, well, I remember that camera. Maybe that was it. I don't know. But those two cameras, my dad's Polaroid that he used for work, and then my mom's Pentax was always just sort of like I said, the family camera.
So the question is, did you actually use these cameras?
I didn't use the Polaroid camera until years later, but whenever I was a kid, I was in 4-H. Is 4-H? Are you familiar with what 4-H is? It's
no.
Okay, because it's like a organization where like the state, the county fairs and the state fairs. If you're a 4-H member, and there are all kinds of different 4-H clubs, but people in your community, there will be a bunch of different 4-H communities or 4-H clubs within your community, and you can basically choose any kind of project in which you will have that on display at the fair. And then there's judging, and it can go to the state fair and nationals and all that stuff, which my brother and I did it just as sort of a community thing. Neither of us ever, really tried to go far with anything. It was just something to do as kids.
Yeah.
And we did things like woodworking and refurnishing furniture, stuff like that. But one of the things I did one year was photography, and I was probably, I would say, 10 years old, and I used my mom's Pentax for that with, and I know it was the Kodak BW400CN. It was the C41 process, black and white.
Yeah.
And I just remember, I shot that. We went on a family vacation in Tennessee, which we did pretty much every year. We went to Tennessee. That's one of our favorite places. But one year I did a project on photography, and I just used photos that I took on the trip. And, my mom taught me how to basically get the exposure. Like I'm assuming,
that's
if I
nice.
remember, I don't remember exactly, but I'm assuming it was just the needle meter inside the
Yeah.
viewfinder, like the K1000. And just taught me how to do that and how to focus it, and that was pretty much it. So I did that whenever I was a kid, but that was it. It wasn't like I was really interested in photography.
Okay.
I thought it would be a lot of fun, but after my project was over, I was done with it. It wasn't like I kept shooting or anything. After that, it was all over with. So
It's a case of done that, move on to something else. So, but
yeah,
basically, you're 10 years of age there. So basically, when you started going, we call it secondary school over here, sort of 11
yeah,
years and upwards to about 16, 17 before they go on to, or 18 before they go on to university, which I know you guys call college.
right.
But where at that age, 10, 11, but what was your main interest at that time? We had a quick chat before. Sport obviously was not your interest at school.
Yeah. Like I said, me and my wife, we're the outliers in our family. Neither of us are sports fanatics, but our entire family, they are diehard sports. I mean, any sport you name it, there's someone in the family that is a
Yeah.
fanatic. But yeah, at the time, I liked riding my bike with my neighbor who I grew up with. I've known him my entire life.
Right.
We're still best friends, but
That's fantastic.
yeah, I mean, we'd ride our bikes whenever we'd go around the neighborhood. I mean, it was just kind of day to day. We would do anything. I mean, and that's the thing. At times, we would be outside and we'd play basketball, but it was just
Yeah.
him and I. It wasn't like we were on a team or anything, or we'd throw the baseball or the football, or we'd ride bikes, or we would, just any kind of stuff like that.
So it's normal kid stuff, which
Yeah,
which we all
it
did.
wasn't so much that I was against sports or anything. Like my
No.
brother, he played every sport in school, and I could sit there, I could go to a football game and have a blast, but and I could play in the backyard, but I never really
Followed
wanted
it
to
through.
be on the team. Yeah.
What was it? What
So,
was your subject at school that you enjoyed doing most then?
honestly, in school, I really liked history.
Really? Okay.
I liked American history a lot whenever I was in sort of junior high and high school as well. And that actually originally my plan before I really started to pursue photography was I was wanting to become a teacher, and I was wanting to do a high school history teacher. So that was kind of the plan, just because I always enjoyed that class a lot.
Yeah.
And I could stay far away from math if I needed to.
Who didn't?
Yeah.
We were all in that boat, weren't we?
Yeah.
So basically, you go through your schooling days, and did you go on to college?
I did. I took 2 years at the local university, which it was Ohio University, but there
Right.
are a few different branches. So there's like the community college version of it rather than the main campus. So
Okay.
I did 2 years here at our local branch of Ohio University, and my plan was to basically take all of my general education classes, the things I knew I would need, and then finish up and get my degree with my last 2 years at the main campus in Athens, Ohio. And after about 2 years, things just kind of changed, and I basically gave myself an ultimatum, which actually my mom offered this ultimatum, which I never saw coming. Which we can get into that now. We can wait. It depends on, because this was kind of when things turned for me to start.
Because my next question after this flow is going to ask you, how did you get into photography? So I'm getting the drift that probably this is the change in your direction.
Yeah, I mean, I was interested. I got into photography whenever I was 13. Yeah, so I was 13 going on 14. That's when I got into photography. And but whenever I was in college, I was doing photography as a job here and there, like on the side. Basically, it was all just people I knew who needed photos, and I never really thought of it ever being a job until I was in high school, and some friends needed senior portraits, and they didn't want to go to another photographer that they didn't know. They just asked me to do them. And I did them for my friends just because it was us going out and taking photos and having fun, and that was really all I cared about. And they offered to pay me, and I was like confused me. I was like, why would you pay me? I'm not, it wasn't like I was just doing it because they're my friends and they wanted to take pictures, and so that slowly just kind of led into me doing it on the side for people. And it was mostly, like I said, people I knew. And it was starting to get a little bit more out there from people that, you know, friend of a friend or people who saw so-and-so's photos. And so whenever I was thinking about moving to Athens to get my degree, my mom, who, like I said, I never saw it coming, I think she just kind of understood that, like, I really wanted to just focus on photography and that's it. And she was like, you know, right now you're young, you're single, you don't have kids, you don't have any of these things that are really holding you, not to say holding you back, but that are keeping you grounded in one spot, you know, and major responsibilities. So she was like, why don't you just take 1 year, focus on your photography, see if you can really make something out of this. And if things don't grow from there, then you can go to school. School's still going to be there. You know,
that ain't going anywhere. No, quite right.
Exactly. And, you know, and I was all for it. If that meant I
Why
didn't,
not?
I
Go
got
for it.
at least a year out of school to try it, you know, I was all for it. And, I mean, it went from it just being a part-time thing to just, it snowballed, really quickly. And that made me, like, busier than ever. And it was pretty quick within that first year that I had to take off. You know, it was probably within the first couple of months, I already knew that school was, you know, that I wasn't going back.
You know,
I understood that, okay, it's really going somewhere now already.
Yeah.
So if I can, you know, the next 10 months are going to be pretty obvious.
You know,
that's
a really interesting point you make there, because I'm literally at this stage going through the same conversation with my son now, who is working up in London. He's working for a very good company, but he's getting a little bit sort of twitchy. Should I change? Should I stay? And I said, look, you've got no responsibilities. You're just bringing in a salary. He's good enough to obviously pay some money into the household. That's by the by. I said, whilst you haven't got that responsibility of a house, a mortgage, food to pay, wife, and then kids probably. Whilst you haven't got that, just go for it. You know, just a year or two, because you've got those skills. You can go back to those skills and pick up the reins and go for it. Then it's exactly the same conversation I'm having.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing, you know, and like I said, I was blown away that my mom, you know, made that offer, because she was always very, you know, as soon as you get done with, you know, high school, you're going to college, you're going to get your degree, you know, and I mean, it was very like, this is just the way things work. Yeah. Especially around here, you know, I live in a really small town, and, sort of the creative endeavors aren't the most popular thing here. You know, I mean, it's almost unheard of for people to not, you know, immediately either go to college and get a degree as a teacher or a doctor, a nurse, things like that, or you're going to go work at some of the, you know, like the paper mill in town, or, you know, places like that, a factory job. I mean, it was really, it's either one or the other. And
do you get let me just get a picture of regards to the town where you live. So you're saying they basically go to school, they go to college or university. Do you get a lot of younger people, students, I use the term there, at that point, leaving your town and moving to the bigger cities?
A lot of people, it's interesting, because a lot of people, especially growing up, they have a bad, the town leaves a bad taste in their mouth, because they think, oh, it's just a small town, there's no opportunities there, I need to get somewhere else.
I want the city lights.
Right, exactly. And a lot of people, the typical thing is for people to move an hour north to Columbus, Ohio. That's the capital, and that's, you know, it's a big city. It's a very progressive city. You know, there's a lot of different opportunities for people there, no matter what you're interested in. And it's common for people to want to leave and move up there, but it's also common for those people that do move to end up moving back within a year or two, thinking, okay, now I miss the small town, slow paced, relaxed kind of thing. So but you know, that's the same things to say. I have close friends who have moved to Columbus, and they couldn't imagine ever, you know, moving back to a smaller town. Really? So it's you know, it all depends on the person.
Six of one, half a dozen the other, as we say in this country. Yeah, exactly.
Right, exactly. But yeah, it is. It's very common for people to want to leave after high school, especially to go off to college. And you know, and I totally understand that, because like I said, I was in the same boat. I was really looking forward to having those 2 years left at the Athens University, just because, you know, it was something different. As much as I love my hometown, this is where I've lived my whole life, and
Yeah.
you know, I thoroughly enjoy living where I do. But you know, I was interested in that just as much, so I totally understand.
Yeah, exactly right. So this is really quite a good segue, actually. So it's your mum that she didn't push you; she just asked you, "Well, why didn't you give it a
Right?
try?"
Yeah.
And
She
you
put the
took the
offer on the
opportunity.
table.
How did your photographic business develop from there? Tell us about the type of photography which you wanted the business that revolves around.
Yeah, I at the time there was a lot of family portraits and senior portraits, and mostly senior portraits. I think because a lot of people were asking, you know, telling their parents, "Hey, there's this guy in town who is, you know, a year or two older than me, and he does this." And I think that that worked out because they felt a lot more comfortable,
Yeah,
either because they knew me or because it's just someone else their age, essentially. You
yeah,
know,
exactly. Yeah,
it's not someone else who they have no idea who it is, and there's no common ground there. Because I mean, when I was a senior in high school, I did not want senior portraits done at all. You know, I was highly against it. And my cousin, his wife does photography on the side. So my mom suggested, well, we'll just have her take them so we can help support her. But, you know, you need to have some pictures taken. So I totally get whenever I would get somebody who did not want to be there. They did not want to have their photo taken. You know, you're a high school senior. You're not the most comfortable in your own skin at that age. You know, I don't think
yeah,
anybody is. So I totally understood that, and it helped me because I could they could relate to me, and I could relate to them. You know, it helped kind of break the ice a little bit. They felt a
mm,
lot more comfortable, and it was great for me because I got a lot of experience that way, both in photography. Obviously, I had been shooting for years before then, but um, you know, it gave me experience in shooting professionally, you know, shooting with a client and not just out for my own enjoyment.
yeah.
And also just the kind of just the experience of having clients and having people who are coming to you, and just that sort of the communication between, you know, the photographer and the client, things like that. You know,
Yeah.
it was good for me to kind of get my feet wet early on and really just learn as I went, because like I said, I didn't go to school to become a photographer. I you know, whatever I learned through trial and error. Even from the beginning of my photography, when I first got a camera, you know, there wasn't YouTube at the time, so
No.
I couldn't look anything up. I had to just burn through rolls of film and trial and error. So,
Yeah.
you know, it was good for me though, just because I was able to, like I said, just kind of learn as I went, and it wasn't a lot of pressure. I was doing it for, I mean, extremely cheap, probably way too cheap, but you know, I was a kid, I was learning, and at the same time with seniors, like I said, I did families, so it was a lot of my friends saying, "Yeah, my mom has always wanted family pictures, so maybe I'll tell her that you do them now," you know, and
Yeah.
and that made it easier for my friends to be in their family portraits that they didn't think was that cool. You know what I mean? It was just, it kind of worked out that way.
Just built on it nicely. And so basically you're in a situation where you could start offering packages regards to sort of albums with
Right.
for the people that were sitting for you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I mean, I've been doing it. I went full time and really focused on it at the beginning of 2000, or no, I'm sorry, at the end of 2010. And since then, I mean, I haven't done any advertising. I haven't had to go to any expos or anything like that in the Columbus area or anything like that. I've literally only relied on using my social media and word of mouth. You know, people who know me and I've taken photos for them, and they just tell their friends and family. And it's
And
been nice knowing that I don't need to worry about getting my photos in front of people or anything. I just rely on the people who I work with. And especially if they're people that I had a really good experience with, I can count on their friends and family being the kind of people that I would have more good experiences with. You know what I mean?
and they say that's the best way to develop a business, by word of mouth. You know, you're actually using
Yeah.
that. But you made a very good point there with regards to your social media activity.
Yeah.
I tell you what we're going to do at this stage, because yeah, you're good at this. You're good at this. I'm just wondering whether we go to do a little do a screen share, Matt.
Oh,
Nice
yeah.
little
Yeah.
segue. Let's do a screen share, because your website is in is, as I would term it, in surgery at the moment. You're
Yeah,
you're,
yeah,
you're having an overhaul.
yeah. All day today, I've
all,
been just going through things and
all day at it.
really updating a lot of different stuff. So I'm hoping my goal is to have everything up, the new site, everything finished by the first of the year.
Well, there you go. Yeah,
So
that'd be ideal. Now, but the reason why, because of what you've been talking about with regards to not necessarily going out there and advertising, but basically using social media and word of mouth. Instagram is one of these sites which just leads itself ideally for exactly for what you've just said.
right.
You can show your work quickly, you get a following, and basically people say, oh, take a look at Matt Day's work, he's done this and that, and he can see it. Now this is personal stuff, this is photographs of you and
Yeah,
your family and pets,
this
and also
is I use Instagram for absolutely everything. I share personal work, I share the work that I do for clients, I share, photos of my daughter, my wife, my cameras, the books I'm reading. I mean, I share everything, and I, in a way, I do that intentionally because I feel like it helps. I always engage with other photographers whenever they're sharing more than just their work. I like knowing the photographer.
yeah.
And I feel like that's, if I feel that way, obviously other people are going to feel that way too. Some people might not. Some people might prefer just to see the work, and that's fine. My just preferred method is I'm going to be as transparent as I can and just show people what my life is as a photographer, the photographs I'm making as a husband, a father, just everything all around.
Yeah. I can see a little girl here who's keenly interested in a camera, which you better is that your daughter there?
That's my daughter. That's
I was
Nora.
just going to say, Nora, you better keep an eye on that camera because I've got a feeling that may go missing one year.
Yeah,
But
that
what I
one.
wanted to ask you was, in terms of the gear that you're using, while we're looking at photographs here, I noticed there's a beautiful was it an F100 there?
Yeah,
An
I had an
F100.
F100 years ago, a couple of years ago, and I ended up selling some gear recently to a friend, and he asked if I could basically take some cash off of his end if he could throw in his F100 and some film. And I was like, yeah, absolutely.
Exactly right.
I'm always, swapping cameras and things, and the F100's a really fun camera.
Yeah, it's true enough on that one. I noticed a Leica there as well. So what I wanted to ask you actually, Matt, what gear are you using for your professional work?
My professional work, I mainly use the Nikon D750, which is digital.
Okay. Yeah.
So I shoot with I have two D750s that I mainly use for my families and weddings and engagements, things like that. But I try to always incorporate a little bit of, my film into the actual shoot as well, whether it be a roll of black and white film in my Hasselblad or my Yashica or anything like that. I also try to incorporate instant film just because it has a special look and, in my opinion, just a special experience. And it's always fun to kind of incorporate that whenever I can. So it's usually always my D750 as well as, a little bit of film in there. Like I said, whether it be black and white or instant, I try to just kind of mix things up and really use whatever camera I feel like is going to be most effective, I guess, for that situation. Obviously,
Yeah,
if
sure.
I'm shooting fast paced, things, I'm not going to be shooting with my Hasselblad really.
No,
But if
exactly
I'm
right.
yeah, I just kind of grab I always grab my D750 and then I just kind of throw in whatever else fits.
That's great. Is that an FE2 there or an FM?
FM2, yeah. Yeah.
FM2.
That's one of
Okay.
my all-time favorite cameras.
Well, it is mine, but unfortunately, I didn't know at the time and I sold it. And I wish I'd
Oh,
never sold it.
I
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, say it's funny you mentioned that. That exact FM2 actually was in a good friend of mine's possession for a couple of years, and finally I was like, okay, if you're willing to part with it, then I'm definitely buying it back from you, because that's
Exactly.
kind of the deal. Whenever I sell cameras to my friends, I say I'll sell it to you under one condition, and that's if you ever decide to sell it, I get first dibs. You have to ask me
That's
first.
a nice one. That's a nice
Yeah,
move. I
because
don't know why
like I said, it's
I don't know why I sold the FM2. I don't know. I got bitten by the FE2 and I started to use that, and of
you
course
know
the digital age hit us, and I moved on to Nikon D50, D200, and that sort of gear.
Right, right. I know how it goes though. I
Uh,
actually just got a new lens for my M6 a couple of weeks ago, and it's a lens I had a couple of years ago. But I,
yeah.
I bounce around with my gear a lot. There are a few cameras I've never sold and that I never will, but I'm always swapping cameras and just in my opinion, that's half of the fun with shooting film is the variety of cameras you have there.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing because in discussion I was having with some friends just yesterday on a walkabout, and I suddenly realised that I wasn't just a one camera, one lens man anymore. I've got three cameras now, a couple of lenses. I've now got a Holga. I've still got one, two, three, four film cameras up there, which are Nikon's,
Yeah.
not the FM2, unfortunately. I'm interested. I've stopped it here because one of the shows which I was particularly interested, which you talked about at length, that you were using Ilford, and in this case, it shows Ilford 120 film with your Hasselblad there. I think there must be a Nikon at the back there as well. Have you actually, dare I use the term, switched from Kodak film to Ilford now? Because you were saying in the show that you really enjoyed using that material.
Yeah, I for years I only shot Tri-X. I mean, I didn't
Yeah.
mess with any other film. I knew exactly what film I liked, what developer I liked, and I shot it consistently. I didn't want to change anything because I liked having that consistent look that I knew and that I trusted. And I really just started thinking more and more about the future of film and those that are actually dedicated to film photography and
Yeah.
especially black and white film photography. And in my opinion, as much as, Kodak still, as much as they still make Tri-X and sell it, and as much as they're doing with the motion picture film and things like that, uh, it's clear that the true dedication behind black and white film photography is there with Ilford.
Yeah.
I mean, they are completely dedicated, not only in their films, but in their papers and their developers. I mean, it goes without saying. So I really started thinking about that, and that kind of got me interested in trying out Ilford films. And then I wanted to start bulk loading my film just for not only for the cost efficiency, but just kind of for the process of it. I like any kind of hands-on thing I can do with film. And that was just another step of the process. So I started looking into bulk loading, and I realized that when I did it with Tri-X, I'm not really saving much money, but if I did it with Ilford films, it cuts the cost in half. So that's
Wow.
when I really was like, okay, if I'm going to bulk load film, I might as well save money while I'm doing it. And
So,
I started looking up.
sorry to interrupt you, Matt. When you're saying bulk
No,
loading film, I appreciate the process of bulk loading film from a larger spool onto a smaller spool to fit into the camera. But is this just purely 120 film here, or are you also bulk loading film with 35 millimeter?
Well, actually, I'm only bulk loading 35 millimeter.
Only 35.
So
Okay, right, fine.
yeah. So the 120, which I don't think there's any way to bulk load 120.
I wasn't sure. That's one of the
Yeah,
reasons for me
I
asking.
don't think there is. But when at the time I was mainly shooting only 35 millimeter.
Right.
So that was one of the main reasons I started thinking about bulk loading, was because I don't think I had any 120 cameras at the time. That was sort of in my stage
Hmm.
where I was trying to, slim down on the gear. And
Yeah.
so I was shooting all 35, and I started looking at the costs. And once I saw that, I just bought a few rolls of HP5, Delta 400, and
Hmm.
Pan F. And the Pan F I knew wasn't going to be like my everyday film since it's a 50 speed. I
Yeah.
knew that wasn't going to be just my everyday shooter, but I wanted to try it out just because. And I really liked Delta 400. It's insanely sharp and really, really fine grain. The negatives looked great, but there was just a quality in the HP5 that I liked. I liked a little bit of the more rough grain texture
I'm
that I
with you.
found in HP5, and it was a lot more similar to what I was used to in Tri-X.
Hmm.
So I think that just kind of made it an easier transition for me. And after that, I mean, I shot those rolls. I found out that HP5 was what I was going to go with, and I immediately the next day started loading up, bulk loading my HP5, and that's the only film I've shot since then is Ilford films.
And how long has that been shooting with Ilford now?
Oh gosh, let me think. It's been I would say probably maybe early this year, as
Yep.
in March maybe. I
I
think it
think,
was around March that I made the switch.
yeah, I think
Um,
I saw the show on that because this is a sort of refresher from Ted Forbes's show, and I
yeah,
remember catching that show. I was really interested because I had in my idea that that I was going to get back into film photography myself. By the
yeah,
way, great images there. We didn't stop and talk about each particular image. I just kept it
yeah. No,
scrolling through because I
that's
think
fine.
it gave a great background to the work that you're sharing on Instagram, and I think it's a great tool for not only yourself as and as a photographer to advertise your work out. And whether you've got a
Thank you.
huge or a huge following or a little following, it at least gives people an opportunity to say, look, this is not his work, but this is the work, this is photography which he is showing.
Right,
And of course,
right.
your work becomes your website and
Yeah,
your galleries, which adds another addition. Getting back to what I was
absolutely.
saying about the use of film, and it's interesting, isn't it, how we started off with the digital age, and my first digital camera I bought in 2000, probably a little bit later than that, and went through that. And the camera manufacturers were looking to create that perfect sensor, no
Right,
noise sensor, getting it absolutely perfect. And yet, there's so many photographers from the film days were saying, yeah, but it hasn't got that nice grain touch to the image. And you've just
right.
mentioned it there in the HP5. Um, it's interesting that I'm a Fuji user now, and with the X100S in particular, although the sensor is the same in the other three cameras that I've got in the Fuji range, I get more of a film-like quality out of the images using the
Yeah,
X100S, and it's
absolutely.
absolutely great to use that camera for that purpose. But it's interesting you mentioned about the Ilford because I got a Holga, as I said to you before the show, from a birthday present. Just a
Yeah.
simple little plastic camera, plastic lens, and I put this HP 120 film in, and I can't wait to get the film developed. I'm not at the moment developing my own film, and I noticed you're doing your own developing now.
Yeah, yeah,
Can
I have a
you?
darkroom at home, so I do all of my developing and printing here in the house.
That's what I was going to say. Could you just tell us about your workflow very briefly with your film, your
Yeah,
developing and processing?
yeah, I basically I try to stay as on top of all of my developing that needs done as much as I can. So I try not to have, you know, boxes and boxes full of film that needs processed. I try to be as up to date as I can because one, with social media, I like sharing you know, what it is I'm shooting, even whether it's paid work or just, you know, photos of my daughter or our dogs. You know, I'm always
Mhm.
sharing that kind of stuff. So I try to stay on top of it as I can. So usually whenever I get maybe 3 to 6 rolls of 35 millimeter shot, I will go ahead and develop all of those at once.
Oh,
And then
okay.
if I get maybe 2 to 4 rolls of 120, I'll develop those at once because I have 2 tanks and I usually develop 2 tanks at a time. Just because if I'm going to be in there, you know, working, I might as well get a good amount done, you know, while I'm in
Yeah.
there. So I'll load up 4 rolls of 120, like 2 in a tank, 2 per tank and 2 tanks, and then 6 rolls of 35 millimeter with 3 rolls per tank. And that's usually as far as developing goes. Once I just usually wait until I hit that number and then I get in the dark room, whether it be early in the morning or late at night,
Okay.
and hang it up. It's ready to scan from there. So after it dries, I will bring it up here into my office, and the medium format I scan on the Epson V600. And
Okay.
that scanner it's great for black and white medium format, in my opinion. Obviously, it's not perfect. There are really high end film scanners that will do a much better job, but for less than $200, it's done a great job for me scanning black and white. I used to develop all of my color film at home, all of my C41,
Mhm.
and it's a lot more that goes into scanning color film than black
Mhm.
and white. And the flatbed scanners, in my opinion, can only go so far in terms of scanning color negative film. So for black and white, it's great. You know, I don't really have any complaints, especially for the price.
No.
And all of the 35 millimeter, I use a Kodak Pacon F135 Plus scanner. And this is, are you familiar with the Pacon scanners?
I'm not familiar with the scanners now, but
They are, yeah, they're it's kind of interesting. Which I have a video on my YouTube channel on the scanner itself. They only scan 35 millimeter, and they basically scan the whole roll all at once. So what you do is you feed the roll in, and it has gears in there that pull the film through, and it will pull an entire strip of 36 exposures all the way through, and it all just kind of spirals into this little, bucket in the front of it, essentially. Scans all the way through, and then when you're done, you have all of your scans there. You can make your adjustments and then export them. So it's really, really interesting. They were made years ago for like mini labs and 1 hour photo labs because they're so easy to use. The issue with them is that you have to use Windows XP because they are really old, and you can't use the software for anything else but Windows XP. So the workaround for that, I have a virtual machine, VMware 6. I have that on my Mac. So I will pull that up. I run Windows XP on that, and I have my Pack-On hooked up to it. And that's the workflow for it. It's they produce great files.
Once you've done the scanning, then what editing program do you use? Lightroom?
Lightroom, yeah. If there's a really difficult spot that it's difficult Photoshop, but I try to stay as far away from Photoshop as I can because I just feel that Lightroom can do way more than I ever really need it to. You can be very minimal with Lightroom and get through a lot of photos really quickly. So I try to stay in Lightroom.
Okay, I'll just stop you there a second because we're getting a little bit of an interference problem now. I think your picture's back. We got your sound all the way through that, by the way, but we lost you. We lost the visual, but you're back now. If any of you, I've just got to say this, Matt. This is absolutely fantastic. I can see a scale here as regards to the viewers which are online, and I've just got to thank all the viewers that have joined us. At the moment, it's saying here there are 67 viewers.
Nice.
Which is really, really fantastic. So
that's awesome. I tried to send out the link as much as I could.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, so that's good to hear.
Awesome. It's absolutely superb, and that normally means that 67. There's probably around about 75 watching because it's never a true scale.
Yeah.
So I'll just do a quick apology if any of you guys can hear this little pinging going in the background. That's my Google Plus Hangout chats, which I cannot cancel. As we speak, so just ignore that. It's not a submarine coming up the road and checking out where we are, but it's just the little pings. But let's get back to your workflow on that. So Lightroom, and there is a reason for me asking this because I'm getting back into printing myself, and I want to print mono. Do you have any particular problems with when you're printing your mono images? Do you have any type of color cast, which you could give a couple of tips how we could get rid of a color cast?
I've never run into any issues. You're talking about digital prints, right?
So from your Lightroom, you go to your printer. I've got an Epson R1900 here, which is a bit of a back in the day type printer, but I'd sometimes get either a purple or a green cast to the images which are printed.
Gotcha. I actually don't do any inkjet printing at home.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know I know what you're talking about, though. I've seen prints that have a little bit of a purplish hue to it because if it is inkjet, but I don't know what would be the workaround of that, whether it be different ink or paper, or if there's something in Lightroom that you do specifically.
Yeah, that's right. The reason I mentioned it also, obviously the fact that you're doing your own work from effectively Film Negative was Ted put a show out a couple of weeks back, and he was talking about the new Epson P600, which has got, I think, please correct me if I'm wrong here, something like about 3 blacks. One's the gloss, one's the matte, and then there's a semi one that comes in between there. And that is it helps the problem. That the color cast doesn't matter. It's just a thought in passing as we were talking about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's an interesting aspect there. So really, I suppose the best way to determine, I've heard this mentioned before. You're almost you there? Are you?
I lost you.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back now.
Okay, you're like a hybrid printer in actual fact, because you're not printing as per se from a darkroom. You're printing. Who does your printing then? Do you send that out to third party?
Yeah, well, the work that gets printed for clients is done at a lab in Tennessee,
Okay.
but for my own personal work, I print that in the darkroom myself with my enlarger and,
Okay.
the wet process.
Okay. I got that.
Yeah.
That's great. Let's turn to the show. Um, what was it that made you decide to start the show in the first place?
Um, Honestly, it was a lot of just not being able to find what I was wanting to watch,
Okay.
or just information I was looking for. If there's a new Nikon or Canon camera that's coming out, there are thousands of channels out there that will give you every single spec on that camera
Yeah.
100 times over, and it's really, really easy to find that information. But being a film photographer, it's hard to find a lot of information and thorough information on cameras, especially on YouTube, in video format.
Yeah.
You can scroll through forums all day long and get all kinds of information, but that's if you're digging through forums that are sometimes dated back to the early 2000s, to find out information on a specific Hasselblad question or
Yeah.
Mamiya question or things like that. And I personally always like to actually see the camera and see things that are being talked about rather than just reading it. I feel like it clicks a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I would always think, well, I'd like to try that camera out. So I'd search it up online, and the first thing I would go to would be YouTube. I would always check YouTube to see, is there a video on this camera where someone is talking about it? And there are channels out there that have videos on all kinds of different cameras, on Leica cameras, Hasselblad, Mamiya, Polaroid cameras, Yashicas. There's all different kinds of cameras out there.
They're all there.
But there weren't any channels that were consistently making videos. It was, I have this camera, so I'll go ahead and make a video on it in case anyone's interested. But that's really it. There wasn't a channel that was consistently trying to bring more eyes onto film and to film cameras and, things like that, which originally that was the whole goal. Was I want to make a channel where people can see things about every single film camera that I get. At the time, I had a ton of different cameras, and I knew that eventually I was just going to get all kinds of different film cameras. And, I just wanted to be able to have some kind of resource for people. I wanted people to be able to learn about these cameras if they were thinking about buying one. And basically just pursuing that, I started thinking, there's a lot of things that there are a lot of things I think about and that I'd love to just discuss about photography and about film and just about being a photographer and all of these different things where, as much as she supports me and loves me, I don't think my wife really wants to hear about all of it. So I needed some kind of,
some kind of outlet.
Yeah.
That's great. That's my excuse now. That's my excuse.
Yeah, because I mean, like I said, and my wife, she has an FM2, and she'll shoot weddings with me, and she's taking photos all the time, like, so she appreciates it, but I'm sure that she doesn't need to hear me just airing my thoughts 24 hours a day.
Right.
So yeah, that was kind of a thing I thought, maybe other people would like to hear this as well. So I started kind of including videos like that where I just talk about photography, my thoughts, not to say that I'm the authority on photography or film or whatever the subject at hand is, but it's just a thought. If I can say anything that's going to get people to just think about photography or their photography or anything like that, I like the idea of getting discussions going, getting thoughts going for other photographers. And I really just started kind of putting stuff like that out there, and people really started to respond positively to it. And then, more hands-on shooting. So people, learning about lighting, learning about out shooting around town, and just trying to get people as involved and, really just kind of open that window up into my personal photography, experience. That's kind of the whole goal there.
I think what you've done, actual fact, Matt, is created a show which basically talks to you about your experiences of photography. You're not directing instruction out to people. It's the experiences of your photography and the instruments, the tools that you use,
Right, right.
which is really what you're trying to do. So it's gone hand in hand. I think it's a great idea where you say you don't want to be talking to your wife about photography all the time, so you wanted to just pass it on to the audience out there. That's
Yeah.
actually superb.
Yeah, I mean, I pick on her and give her a hard time enough as it is. So I need to, if I can, cut her some slack anytime I can, I'll try to do that.
Well, I was going to say, she must be pretty good to be in your team to do the wedding photography. Has she given you any tips? Why don't you try this, Matt, instead of that?
She has actually, like, she knows me better than anybody out there. She can read me like a book if I'm thinking about something or if I'm not feeling something, no matter what it is, she already knows what's going on in my head. And she's always giving me feedback on things. And it's not to say she's trying to, control what my
No.
photography is or business or anything like that. She's being helpful because, like I said, she knows me better than anybody. And sometimes she'll say something and I'm like, yeah, why didn't I think that makes so much more sense, So it's a good thing. We're a good team, and it's funny. People on YouTube are constantly leaving comments, that they love whenever Molly's in the videos and always talking about how patient she is, which she definitely has, more patience than anyone I know, because I'll have her be my subject for a video,
Yeah.
and I'll be sitting there talking to the camera for 10 minutes before I even start shooting, and she's just sitting there as patient as can be. So yeah, I got very lucky.
Take a tip from me as well. You wait till your daughter grows up and she knows exactly what you're talking about as well. Then you're like, you got a bookend.
Yeah.
you got the both side of you.
Yeah. I'm sure I'll be bouncing back and forth between the two of them at some point.
Exactly right. It'd be like a tennis match, just volleying at the net. Oh, dude, it's fantastic because I know exactly what you're going to have down the line. I know.
Yeah,
Absolutely. That's the way it
we're,
goes.
yeah, we're just getting started, but it's like I said, I'm very, very lucky to have that kind of support system, that kind of partner, and it's really helped me grow my photography. Just being a photographer, as far as my relationship with my clients, the way I can connect with the people, even just through YouTube, she's a big help with all that kind of stuff. So it's
great.
Really, really good.
That's great. And have you found the show has helped your photography?
For years, I've always watched Ted Forbes' channel, The Art of Photography. I really liked Ted's channel from the start, just because it wasn't so gear specific, as much as I love nerding out on different film cameras, I could talk about all of the little different mechanical things in each camera. And, I love shooting different cameras. Ted's channel, it was, and it still is, just a breath of fresh air as far as a photography channel, because it's much more about the process and not just, the gear that we use.
It's a go-to show, isn't it, really?
Yeah. I mean, there are so many.
It's a go-to show, in my opinion, because I just love buying photography books. And I must be honest, as soon as Ted recommends a book, or he doesn't recommend it, that's the unique thing. He just says what beautiful work you can study by getting this book. Exactly. Whether it's a Cartier-Bresson or whether it's a Michael Kenner, whoever you want to throw into that equation, but that's his style, and that's the way I love the way he gets into that. And then at the same time, yes, he's done some reviews on camera gear, but it's not over the top. It's like a user would go through the camera, and it's not sort of so detailed, so in depth in regards to what the camera does. And
exactly, it's it's one thing to use the camera, talk about your experiences and what worked for you. Then it's completely different to read all of the specs off of the website list and just spit out the information. I mean, anyone can look up the website and read that stuff. I'm more interested in real world use. What's it like? What is it? How does it make you shoot? I mean, not to say that certain gear will make you a better photographer by any means, or will make better pictures, but whenever we're talking about film cameras specifically, I love just studying the idea of different cameras and the way you shoot them, the way you hold the camera, how that influences your composition, your the way you approach your subject. I mean, whether you're using a waist level viewfinder or a rangefinder, or you're using a 4x5, you know, I mean, there's, I really like, you know, just kind of thinking about that whenever I'm choosing a camera, just thinking not what's going to make the best image or produce the best results or make me a better photographer, but just, you know, how are these things, these differences, how are they going to influence me as I'm shooting?
Yeah.
And those are the kind of things I try to share on my videos about cameras, just
Yeah.
because, you know, with most modern digital cameras, well, modern DSLRs, I should say, because mirrorless cameras, there's a lot of different things about those cameras that I think can change the way you would shoot as if you were shooting with a DSLR. But, you know, if you have a Nikon or a Canon, I don't really think that either camera is going to influence your composition or how you're shooting or anything like that. But if you're shooting with a Hasselblad or a pinhole camera, two very different things. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
very
So
true.
it's,
Yeah.
which actually goes to your point where you mentioned the Holga.
Yeah.
I had a shoot recently with a band, and I shot all different formats. It was all film. And I had two 6x6 cameras on the shoot. I had my Hasselblad and I had my Holga. And I shot the exact same scene with my Hasselblad and my Holga. And with the glass that's on the Hasselblad and how perfect and everything that image was, whenever I had the two, I preferred the Holga image by
Right.
far over the Hasselblad photo, you know,
Because
and
it gave you that atmosphere in the image. Is that what you're saying?
yeah. I mean, it's just, they're two completely different things, and it's
Nice.
not about what makes the superior image, because a little
No.
plastic box with a plastic lens, I enjoyed that photo way more than I did with a Hasselblad that's, you know, one of the most revered systems ever. So
Very
it's
true.
just, it's, you know, it's all about personal preference, the way it's making you shoot, the way it fits to whatever your subject is. You know, it's just, I love that kind of stuff. I think it's fascinating. And
It's interesting you mentioned that in those two cameras in particular, because one of my guests, Michael Kenner, when we talked about his work, and it was just prior to him releasing his book, or it had just come out at the time, the France book. And there
yeah,
were a number of images in that book which hadn't been printed at all. He'd gone back into his archive and was printing images that he created in 1970s and the 80s before he put the book together. But I then asked him a question. I said, okay, Michael, you're going out for a walkabout. What camera do you grab and take out? Surely you don't take your Hasselblad. He said, no, of course not. He said, I take this. And he held up his Holga.
yep.
And he said, in actual fact, Paul, he said, there are some images in the book which I've created with the Holga. And he said, they just give it that difference and that atmosphere to the image, which sometimes suits that image. And well, gobsmacked, basically, that you would expect
Yeah.
a
Yeah,
photographer that ilk to use a Holga to put it in his book.
exactly. Like I said, I mean, it's all about the tool for whatever that subject is.
Yeah,
And
exactly right.
you know, I mean, that's, again, that's one of the things I love so much about shooting film, is just that we have so many options. Because, you know, I mean, if we're talking modern Lars, and like I said, I own two Nikon D750s, so it isn't about film being better.
No.
It's just about, it's a completely different process. It's a different technique. And you know, I like having that option to really kind of shoot a little bit differently and try and throw in something different than just, you know, the same thing every single time.
Yeah.
And some people would prefer to have that 100% consistency.
Yeah.
Every single shot is reliable, and that makes sense, definitely, at a certain point. I just feel that I personally would get really, really burnt out if I didn't have, you know, a variety of tools and a variety of different looks that I could produce.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. Totally agree.
Yeah.
Come to the point in the show where a number of my guests normally balk at the question because they don't like to say it. But I'm going to ask you, Matt, who's your favorite photographer?
It's a tough question, but I'm gonna say Elliot Erwitt,
Right. Okay.
because as many photographers I look up to and I admire and study, Elliot Erwitt has been the one constant for years that I've always appreciated his work more than anyone, specifically for the humor in his work.
Yep.
Because, you know, it's easy for photographers to not take themselves too seriously, but it's very common to find work that's very, very serious, and it has a very serious undertone throughout everything.
Mhm.
And not to say that is a bad thing by any means, because there's so much important photography in history
Very
that
much so.
are documenting extremely serious things and touching on serious, serious issues. Uh, but I love that Elliot Erwitt, the way he shoots, the humor he finds are things that you would think that everything he shot would be staged at some point. You know what I
Exactly
mean? I
right.
mean,
Yeah, yeah.
whenever I get through his book, there's so many different books that I would
Mm.
go through and just think, how could this possibly have just happened? And he was the one right there to capture it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
unreal. But aside from just the humor in his work, the way he presents himself in every interview I've ever read or watched, I love that I just love that he doesn't take himself too seriously. One of my favorite things of Elliot Erwitt ever was, there was I can't remember what camera it was, or maybe it was just for a store opening or something, but there was a big Leica event, and I think maybe it was a gallery opening, and there were so many just legendary photographers, and they're interviewing everyone at this event, saying, why do you shoot with a Leica camera? And I shoot with my M6, and I love my Leica, but I love whenever they're going through and asking everybody, and everyone is giving these really long-winded answers about, the beauty of the camera and the way it makes them shoot. And they were just going on and on about, typical things that you hear people say whenever it's a
Yeah.
Leica camera. And they got to Elliot Erwitt, and he was like, why wouldn't I? It's a good camera. And that was all he said. And I was like, that's perfect,
End
because
of bang on.
and he's at this event, and these people from Leica are, trying to get these, little
Yeah.
sound bites essentially from these people to talk about their cameras. And he just, yeah, it's a good camera. Like, that's it. I love that. And
Short and simple to the point. Thank you.
exactly,
Bang.
yeah. He wasn't getting all fixated on it. He just, yeah, I like the camera. That's pretty much why I use it. And
Yeah.
I love that. So Elliot Erwitt is by far my favorite, even though I have, like I said, tons of other photographers that I
I couldn't
definitely.
agree more with you. I've got tons of great photographers up there. There's
Yeah,
Aberrado, Morel, Brassai,
yeah,
um, Cartier-Bresson. Ansel Adams is up there as well, obviously. But the one that I go to all the time, as everyone knows who watch my show regularly, is Soul Lighter. It's
yeah.
just they're
Which,
the images for me that just
yeah, and I've
grab.
learned a lot about that through the art of photography as well, on
Yeah,
his
exactly.
videos
Yeah,
on the work.
exactly. Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, some of the photographers that he's shown, William Klein, William Eggleston, those sort of photographers are all fantastic work that you can reel off. There are so many good ones, but if there is
right, right,
the reason behind the question is, what is that one photographer that you pick up and you never get tired of looking at the images and
exactly.
hearing what
Yeah,
they have
I
to
mean,
say?
it doesn't matter what kind of mood I'm
No,
in. Certain photographers, if they're documenting really just sad things and tragic things, there are going to be times where I don't feel like looking at those
no,
photos.
exactly
You know what
right.
I mean?
Yeah,
And
Salgado type work. It's
yeah,
fantastic work, but you've got to be in the right element, the right mood to
exactly.
look at those images.
I can look at an Elliot Erwitt book and appreciate
Yeah,
everything in the composition, the light, and things like that.
yeah,
But if I have a relative over who's just visiting, and they pick up a book off the coffee table and it's an Elliot Erwitt book, they're probably going to find something in there that makes them laugh, or something they like, without
yeah,
having any kind of, knowledge on anything photography technique wise. You know what
yeah,
I mean?
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
couldn't agree more with it. It's a great choice. Great
Yeah.
choice there. So the next question: inspiration. Who is the person or thing that has inspired you the most?
I would say, for the most part, inspiration for me has always come from skateboarding, in a lot of different ways, and you know just in the kind of music I listen to, the movies I watch, the way I dress. I mean, there's all kinds of different things that I can attribute to skateboarding, but just my photography, I think, more than anything, has been inspired most by skateboarding, just because I've been a skateboarder as long as I picked up a camera. And incidentally, I got a camera and a skateboard the exact same summer of my life.
Right.
And the two just always went hand in hand to me. And always growing up looking through skateboarding magazines and seeing not only the photos of the people skateboarding, but the portraits of the skateboarders, the photos from the tour that they were on, you know, in the van or on the side of the road at a skate spot. You know, there was a lot of that documentary photography in the magazines that I really, really appreciated, and things that I think kind of influenced me early on whenever I started shooting. And as I got older and started studying some of the famous documentary and street photographers, you know, I saw that kind of aesthetic that I was used to looking through skateboarding magazines, you know, and it was really interesting to me because I just saw that as photography. I didn't see it as, you know, documentary photography or things like that. That was just what photography was. And to kind of get older and, you know, learn more about everything, learn more about the process of photography, different genres of photography. It was interesting to kind of see that, and it all just kind of clicked. Like, you know, this is just this is like looking through a skateboarding magazine. You know, it's the same kind of thing that I love studying, and it's just it's really, really interesting to kind of compare the two. But biggest influence definitely would be skateboarding, just because it's been a constant for so many years. Nowadays, I watching my daughter get older has been really interesting for me, because just watching her day after day start to, I guess, not notice, in a way, notice things more and really, you know, kind of focus on things more. The tiniest little things, you know, I'm seeing that she's really kind of connecting for the first time, and it's awesome to be able to see that. And there have been certain photos I've made of her where I try to shoot with that in mind, you know, shoot with just that kind of wonder and just genuine interest in one specific tiny little thing. You know, if I'm making a photograph of her, I try to kind of keep that in mind at times. And it's been a really cool thing for me to do, just because it's something new, it's something different. And obviously, if it's a photo of my daughter, I'm going to love it. So
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah,
I might be a little bit biased there, but you know, it's been a lot of
because
fun.
the future down the line, you're going to be looking at those photographs, and you know, there's never enough photographs of your
Exactly.
kids as they grow old.
You know, my wife was, you know, not only did she say that it was okay, but she loved the idea when I said I want to photograph, you know, the whole birth, you know, whether it be her in labor and everything. And just, I mean, I left the hospital. We were there for a couple of days, and I think I had 14 or 15 rolls of 35 millimeter film, you know, that we got home, and that night I was ready to go, and I was developing everything. And now, you know, we have a book at our house, and we made a copy for my parents and Molly's parents as well. And it's just a book from our entire time there, from when we checked into the hospital to when we were leaving. And I still go through it. And not to say that like my photos are gorgeous or, you know, looking at my own work or anything like that. It's just the subject matter, you know,
it's
just
the subject matter, and it's the record of that event. Exactly right.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the coolest things I've ever done with photography, is be able to, you know, document that entire story. And it's just been incredible. So knowing that I'm going to be able to do that year after year as she gets older, and as we have more kids, you know, I mean, it's, as much as I love going out and shooting out, you know, out in the country or going downtown and walking around with my camera, I love that. But it's completely different now. Ever since, you know, she was born, it's like, that's all I ever want to photograph now.
And the other thing is that is obviously available for you. Did you get that done through Blurb or something like that? Something that can be reprinted at any stage?
Yeah.
Exactly
I ordered
right,
it through the Adorama Picks
Picks, yeah, exactly.
hardcover book. Yeah. And I mean, it looks great. It's got nice pages, nice printing and everything. And it's one of the coolest things ever.
And obviously when Nora gets a little bit older, then she's going to be able to appreciate that day that she came into the world.
Exactly. You know, because I mean, like I said, my parents had cameras, and, you know, we have a lot of photos over, you know, our childhood, my brother and I both. And, you know, it's awesome that we have those, but I can't even imagine knowing the kind of record she's going to have when she's older of I mean, every little detail. I mean, there are
Exactly right. Yeah.
tons and tons of images already, and it's just it's going to be overwhelming to say the least. You know, one of these days for sure.
When she turns 21, there won't be enough space on the wall to put the pictures up of
Yeah,
her.
yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Just do a whole book of her life and then give it to her.
Yeah. I mean, really, it's crazy, and you know, it's an interesting thing too, because it's a different kind of photography, but I've always been a big fan of Sally Mann, and seeing her work, you know, her immediate family book, I've always been a big fan of her work. I've always liked studying that kind of photography, and what she did was very different from what I do with photos of my family. You know, I'm very documentary style and nothing really posed, and it's still not to say that I want to do a book or an exhibition on photos of, you know, my kids or my family, but it's a really interesting thing to see that I know that other people would be able to look at it and appreciate it. You know, I shared the photos from our birth on my YouTube channel, and people were, you know, they loved seeing that. You know, they went nuts for it. But at the same time, I like knowing that there are hundreds of these images that are only, you know, I'm not going to do anything with them other than just pass them on, you know, to her whenever she's older, and to the grandkids and things like that. It's a really, really special thing.
Yeah, it's lovely. Matt, thank you so much for joining me this evening. Well, it's the evening in UK here. It's been really interesting talking to you and sharing all your experiences of your photography and your show and your family. Absolutely superb. Thank you so much to all the visitors, the guests that have joined us as well. That was absolutely superb to see that number ticking through there.
That's awesome.
Really, just suffice for me to say, this is the last show before Christmas, so I'm going to wish you all a very Merry Christmas. I do hope that everything you wish for, you get on that very special day. If it's not just sharing that day with your family and eating and drinking and just having a great time. So Merry Christmas to everyone. As I say, last show before Christmas. I'll pick it up shortly after that. And suffice for me to say, if you are going out shooting this weekend, I'm not doing this at the moment, but leave your camera bag at home. All the best to you. Bye for now.